This serves as a second part to my previous video, so if you want the rest of the lore, please go watch that instead of watching this one first. But after that, of course, do watch this one. Well, this is the second part to the lore of Guts and Blackpowder. Sorry for the long wait, but here it is. With Stuttgart and Württemberg lost to the BLIGHT, Bavarian forces retreat in disarray. Ordered to move north through the Alps, Bavarian and Austrian troops reach a remote Tyrolean village, only to become surrounded by the infected, cut off, and dwindling in number. They make a final stand, ultimately overwhelmed by the BLIGHT. Erhard Dentliger, a soldier of the 5th Bavarian Infantry, leaves a note, so once again, pause to read, if you'd like. Despite rising chaos across Europe, Russian command downplays the BLIGHT, calling it a minor illness as the infection spreads. Soldiers in St. Petersburg grow increasingly concerned. For several months, they manage to lead zombies away from the city. But in May 1814, the threat can no longer be ignored. At the request of local forces, Prince Barclay de Tolly organizes a city-wide defense. Garrisons are stationed at key points. Communication is maintained with signal flags, and a mass evacuation begins on May 18th, using fishing boats, carts, and foot travel. Days later, the BLIGHT reaches the city. During the invasion, however, defensive groups across St. Petersburg, supported by mortar detachments, fight to hold their ground. A strange civilian, known as the Hobo, repeatedly bribes army units for guns, cannons, and mortar fire to support the defenders. The remaining forces successfully hold out and signal their position to others in the city. La Ferme d'Anjou was the last stand of forces stationed in Ligny. It takes place some point within 1815 as a precursor to the events of Waterloo. The forces in Ligny were down to 20 men with 3 bags of flour, 40 bottles of juice, and a bag of 5 bread loaves. Waterloo contains the main part of this lore. La Haye stand is one of the final standoffs of British and French forces at Waterloo. It takes place prior to Hougoumont. La Haye stand falls at 8:35 on June 18th, 1815. Players can find a torn note from an unknown soldier near a shed at the front of the farmhouse, surrounded by blood. Here it is on screen. George von Baron is a soldier of the KGL who spreads word of the fall of La Haye Saint. It is presumed that he died in Hougoumont by losing his leg. Hougoumont is the last stand of British, German, and French forces at the farmhouse in Waterloo. The soldiers at Hougoumont intentionally sacrifice themselves to allow for the rest of the French army to retreat from Waterloo. It takes place shortly after La Haye Saint, which is only a few miles from Hougoumont. Players can find a newspaper from the Britannia Herald on the desk in the entrance building, discussing several events going on in the world. Shortly prior to the defense of Hougoumont, the British army abandons the French forces at Waterloo and retreats, causing the French forces to be overwhelmed. The defense of Hougoumont and La Haye Saint gives the main French forces the time necessary to properly retreat from Waterloo. Hougoumont falls by 2 o'clock in the morning of June 19th, 1815. Paris is collapsing under a massive evacuation as tens of thousands of undead overrun the city. At the Cathedral of Notre Dame, a French soldier, John, holds out with his men, using the arrival of reinforcements to begin evacuating civilians. Once the evacuation is complete, the bells of Notre Dame are rung to summon the ferryman. Originally meant for John's regiment to extract the remaining survivors in the Catacombes de Paris, scattered notes reveal the final thoughts of Parisians during the city's fall. After 2 investigative ships return from Vardøhus fortress, an outbreak of the BLIGHT erupts in Copenhagen. The Royal Navy enforces a strict quarantine determined to contain the infection at all costs. As the undead spread, the Navy bombards the city with Congreve rockets, leaving it in flames. Amid the chaos, the scattered Danish army and National Guard survivors attempt to escape the burning city. Articles from ONN Stolpe newspaper can be found throughout the ruins, offering glimpses into the final days before the fall. Following the French evacuation from Paris, American Ambassador William H. Crawford sends a letter to the United States requesting its evacuation from France. Upon receiving the letter, the United States dispatches the USS Constitution to extract Crawford. Crawford is brought to Roscoff by the French army, which fortifies the city. A garrison is stationed at the church and takes Crawford to the attic of a nearby farmhouse. At some point prior to the arrival of US Marines, the zombies breach the city's defenses and overrun it, killing the majority of French forces and forcing the rest to retreat into hiding. In response to the developing situation, the British deploy an expeditionary force to Roscoff to prevent any infected from breaching the shoreline and threatening the British mainland. With severe distrust sown between French and British forces following the British retreat from Waterloo, the French army takes members of the expeditionary force prisoner and kills several of them. Under the cover of fog, the USS Constitution sneaks past the British quarantine of Europe and successfully docks in the harbor of Roscoff. The garrison forces at the church retreat into the catacombs underneath the church, preparing to be overrun by British expeditionary forces, while the scared French soldier holds back the US Marines outside, believing them to be British forces. A large portion of the forces retreating through the catacombs are slaughtered in their retreat. By the events of Roscoff, Jean-Louis has been promoted to the rank of captain and has succumbed to the infection. The players can find a note attached to his corpse, which is retrieved upon killing him. Players can additionally find a note near the docks left by a British prisoner. As for now, that'll probably be it for my Guts and Blackpowder content. There is still some smaller lore, however I will probably not be covering that, as I intend to only cover the main lore, like the maps and such. However, I also want to mention that there have been some people on my previous video saying that the lore I used was incorrect. However, as to my knowledge, I am using the up-to-date official wiki for Guts and Blackpowder, so I honestly think that most of the people saying this are using either an outdated source. However, I could be wrong, but this does mark the end of this video. So leave your theories about Guts and Blackpowder down below, subscribe and join my Discord server. Bye bye.